right, good morning everybody. I thought I would just do this with the screen today since we were doing the drumming with the screen. So we've been talking about Mr. Franz Joseph Haydn. His date 1732 to 1809, and he was 77 years old when he died. He is a classical composer. So we talked about Handel in the Baroque time period, and the word for Baroque was fancy, very good. And then in classical time period, the word is structure. So in classical time period, they like to follow the rules. They like everything to be balanced. They did not add a lot to their music like in the Baroque time period. They wanted it to be more simple, and they had beautiful flowing melodies. So the word structure for the rules and the balance, structure for classical time period, okay? In 1732, March 31st, that was Haydn's birthday. And then if you remember, at 6 years old, his parents sent him to Hamburg, Austria, to live with his uncle. They thought he could get a better musical education there, and he did. He learned to play all of these instruments. He was very talented. But if you remember, there was an issue with having enough food, and Haydn writes about that in his adult life, about feeling like he didn't have enough food. So also he was embarrassed by his clothes because they were oftentimes dirty and torn. So the way he got out of that was by his talent, and the talent was singing. So he was contacted by the Vienna Boys Choir to come and sing in the Vienna Boys Choir, which was located at the St. Stephen's Cathedral, if you remember. But he also had a problem once again, if you remember, and that was once again, he didn't feel like he had enough food, whether they just had a little bit for each boy, or if maybe the older boys were taking from the younger boys, we don't know. But he did write about that he felt like he didn't have enough food. So this time he got himself out of this situation by being the best singer that he could be, so that he could travel and go and entertain the aristocrats and the rich people, and therefore when he went and sang for them, he would get extra food. So that's how Haydn took care of himself during that time period. Now I wanted us to listen to a little bit of the boys' choir today. This is a 520-year-old organization. About 100 boys have been involved all through those years. Not the same 100 boys, of course. But I was surprised when I read it was 520 years old. And what you're going to see is actually a clip of when they went and visited Armenia, because today, in Haydn's time, the boys were mainly from around that area in Austria. But today, boys from all over the world can audition to be in the Vienna Boys Choir. So you're going to see all different nationalities and cultures. You're also going to see various ages of boys as well. And this is a clip from 2 years ago when they went and visited Armenia, because they get to travel all around the world and give concerts. So here is the Vienna Boys Choir. that is the Vienna Boys Choir. Now, most of the time I get comments from students who have not been at Meadow Lane for very long and who are not aware that those boys sound like girls. And I try to tell you this every single year so that you can know there is no difference between a boy's voice and a girl's singing voice. They sound the same. We call it the student voice. So if I were to record a boy singing and a girl singing, it would not be any different. So there's no such thing as boy voice, girl voice. Until you get older and your voice changes, that's when the differences are made. But right now, student voice is what everybody has. Now, I thought I would just play you a little example of what a children's choir here in America sounds like. This is actually a folk song, and they're singing about chickens. This is a choir of boys and
Children's
girls.
Choir.
So when you get older, of course, there's a difference between women's voices and men's voices. These are my silly animations, but women's voice, in the women's voice, there is the high woman's voice called soprano, and there is the low woman's voice called alto. And then in the men's voice, there's the high man's voice called tenor and the low man's voice called bass. I guess you can see that. It looks kind of whited out, but hopefully you can see that. So I have an example of each of these. The examples I'm going to play for you are very classical though. When a singer studies voice at college, this is how they learn to sing. Now the singers that you listen to, if they're adults, they will be one of these voice types, but they will use their voice in a different way than what I'm fixing to show you. So this is actually examples from Handel's Messiah. If you remember, we talked about that with Handel, and some classically trained singing. So the soprano is going to sing, "Oh Mary, what you gonna call your pretty little baby?"
Soprano.
Classically trained singing. Here's our alto, low woman's voice. She is going to sing, "He shall feed his flock like a shepherd." Remember, this is from Handel's Messiah.
Alto.
Then we have our tenor, our high man's voice. He's only going to sing 4 words. "Comfort ye my people." But Handel makes him hold out notes. So see if you hear those 4 words. "Comfort ye my people."
Tenor.
And then last but not least, our low man's voice, which is the bass.
Bass.
And he said, "Upon them hath the light shineth." Because remember, the words from Handel's Messiah were out of the Bible. So the reason I'm going over voice types, one, you need to know about them, but also what happened to Haydn. At 17 years old, of course, he's grown up and his voice has changed, so he can no longer sound like the Vienna Boys Choir sound. So it was one of the rich people, the Empress Maria, who said that Haydn sounds like a crow when he's singing now. Kind of sad, right? But that and the fact that he was quite the prankster. And the last straw happened when he cut one of the boys' hair in the boys' choir. So the fact that he was having trouble matching the sound of the Vienna Boys Choir, and he was making some troublesome choices, they actually kicked him out of the Vienna Boys Choir at 17 years old. And then he had to learn to take care of himself. He became a freelance musician. So that's kind of where I'm going to stop this story for today, okay? Now, I'm wondering if you remember the nickname for Haydn. Now this week, everybody wanted to tell me Handel's nickname. They were remembering too far back. I need you to think about Haydn's nickname. Think about the piece of the type of music that he invented the rules for. Okay, the father of the symphony. Yes, remember he came up with the rules for the symphony, the balance and form for symphony. He wrote 106 of them in his lifetime. Last week we listened to the Surprise Symphony, the Andante walking speed section, and this week we're going to listen to the Clock Symphony, which is also the Andante walking speed section. So remember that these nicknames were not given to these pieces by Haydn. He would have called it Symphony number 101, okay? But the audience heard something that caused them to give these nicknames to these pieces. So they called this one the Clock Symphony. So as you listen, think of this type of clock, the pendulum swinging on that type of clock, and see if you hear why the audience nicknamed it the Clock Symphony. So you're going to click on the next link, and you'll be able to see and hear the instruments and the Clock Symphony, the Andante walking speed section.